All right, good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. Welcome to the Friday edition of the WZ Coffee Break. I know we posted it in the chat section. Wayne had mentioned it, but today is actually the 38th anniversary of WZ being in business, which is incredible. So I'm happy to be a part of it, and I got lucky that it fell on my coffee break. For those of you that missed it yesterday, there's a really great session that Dave Thompson and Dave Zulawski did yesterday afternoon it was just a very casual interview pretty much between Dave Thompson and Zulawski, talking about the experience of the company from when it started with Doug and Dave in 1982 and how it's evolved. It's really incredible to listen to it. And there's a lot of really funny stories that they get into in that segment. So if you haven't checked it out, get onto our page and look for it. It was yesterday. It was called Make It a Double. And it's definitely worth your time to watch. So today what I want to cover is the remote witness, right? We're all in a situation still, and we probably will be for the foreseeable future, where we're going to be relying more heavily at least, on remote interviews, right? So whether you're trained in it or whether you're kind of going, you're winging it, right? Whether you're just used to the in-person and you're trying to apply it in the remote environment. I wanted to cover a few of the fundamental pieces to remember, excuse me, to keep in mind when you're preparing for that remote situation. So the first is preparing in advance. We talk about preparation as being the cornerstone of any investigation, but it's even more critical in a remote environment. So preparing in advance is the witness selection. So making sure that the witness that we decide to use is in line with what our company or organization standards are. So whether that's a gender requirement, a position of leadership, whatever it may be that witness needs to fall into, we need to plan in advance to select the right one. Another piece of the planning and preparation that a lot of people don't, they miss it, is the room selection in advance. If I'm not going to be able to physically be in that environment, if I'm not going to be in that room for the interview, I want to make sure we have the most optimum room selection possible. Right. And that's only possible if I select the witness first, and then I'm able to get with that witness a few days in advance and have them scope out the location, and they can get eyes on and select the best possible room to conduct this conversation. So the preparation is key. The day of the interview, I cannot stress this enough. I suggest to make a list. Make a list of items that you need to cover with your witness so that you are not missing any critical component. I do this with in-person interviews as well, but even more so, again, critical for the remote experience. So things to consider for that list to add to it. Room setup, right? Room setup is critical the same way it is when you're in person, but it's also very, very important when you're not there, right? Because this is not common sense. You need to make sure that you're walking that witness through what are your expectations for how that room is set up. So the same things, the same variables that you need to consider, you need to walk that witness now through, making sure that they're looking for those areas of concern, right? So the placement of the subject, placement of the witness. A lot of times, again, this can be confusing. The witness still needs to be out of sight of the subject. And now the subject, if it's a remote interview, they need to be close to the phone or close to the computer to conduct that video interview. So setting up could be a little tricky. You need to make sure you walk them through that. Some things to also consider is what materials do you need to provide to the witness or to the witness in advance, right? So some materials to consider are the same thing you would do in person, right? You would have a sign on the door. A witness is not going to naturally think to do this in most cases, right? So as I go through, as I'm talking to them on the phone, I'll say, hey, listen, witness, I'm going to be sending you an email. In that email is going to contain a few things. One is going to be a sign that I want you to print off. The sign is going to say something along the lines of meeting in progress, do not disturb, right? Don't put interview in progress, because then you're announcing now to the entire office or store, whatever it may be, that you are now interviewing this person, which that confidentiality piece is now breached. So meeting in progress is all that you need. Include the material, so statement forms, promissory agreements, right? All of these extra things that you may have them printed off, walk through those materials with them in advance so they feel comfortable, because again, they're going to be the only person in that room to orchestrate that process, right? They're your eyes and ears. The contingencies, right? You want to make sure that you cover some contingencies, that what could go wrong in this circumstance, or how could these things evolve in the conversation, so that if and when they do, the witness is not a deer in headlights, right? You've already walked them through that. So for example, You can say, hey, listen, if the individual gets upset, if they get up, if they try to walk out, here's what you're going to tell them, right? And this is going to vary based off your company standard, but you need to know what that response of handling that situation needs to be so you can walk them through that in advance. You can tell them, and this is always a question a lot of witnesses will ask in a remote experience, what if they turn to me and start asking me questions, right, as the witness? So I always nip this in the bud, and I tell them this at the beginning. I will tell the subject at the beginning of the interview, hey, listen, I understand that John Smith is in there. He's acting solely as the witness. This conversation is exclusively between me and you. So any questions that you may have need to be directed squarely on me. No question should be directed on the witness. He is just a body in the room. So making sure you cover that with the subject and also let the witness know that you're going to be having that conversation with them in advance. And then something really simple that a lot of people miss still with the remote experience, when you get to the statement is something that as the interviewer, you walk them through normally, right? So I'm making sure I'm coaching them through that process. If I can't be there physically with them, I'm now relying on the witness, right? So I'm going to make sure that they're going through and they understand what directions I'm going to provide to them at the end of that conversation. I also want to make sure that they know how to use the printer and the scanner. Something very, very simple, but I, as the interviewer, still want to be able to proof and read that statement before the interview is concluded, which is going to require that manager, whoever it is sitting in as the witness, to scan that over to me during the interview. So I've had times where the manager calls me and he's like, hey, listen, man, I don't know how to use a scanner. So then I have to walk them through and teach them how to use the scanner in the middle of the interview. It's a huge distraction. So cover all of those things in advance. Again, a lot of things that you don't consider that you just need to think, okay, if I was physically there, what would I do? All of those things you now need to put onto this new person. So you need to do that in a way that's easily digestible and something that they can absorb and make sense of. So it'll be an effective conversation. So that is all I have for today. Thanks for tuning in. Congrats again to WZ on 38 years. It's an incredible feat. Have an amazing weekend, and we will see you on Monday.